Today's lesson is Plus Talk, a gentle reminder. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we're going to talk about something called a gentle reminder. A reminder, of course, is when somebody tells you something that you need to remember. So, yeah, if you give someone a reminder, that means you're telling them not to forget something that's important, but it needs to be a gentle reminder. It means to be polite so that they don't think you think that they're stupid.
Right. So you don't want to say it in a too direct or in a way that's too strong, because then maybe the other person who is receiving your reminder thinks that you're being rude or you're angry at them. So you give a gentle reminder. And in fact, the phrase a gentle reminder is often heard in public service announcements as a polite way to request that people do or not do something. So for instance, when you're on the train, you might hear a public service announcement giving you a gentle reminder to take your things with you before you get off the train. Or if you're on a flight, you'll hear a gentle reminder that this is a non-smoking flight and to keep your seatbelts on while you're seated.
Right. And in today's lesson, of course, we have Luna, who is going to various places. First of all, she's going to go to a museum, and she's going to be reminded about how to be polite in a museum, how to follow the rules. It's all about museum etiquette. And then later on, she's going to be talking to her professor about a project that she didn't hand in on time. It's a late project. So again, these are all things that have to do with gentle reminders. So let's find out what these are all about, everybody. Let's go to the first part of our lesson and find out about museum etiquette.
A gentle reminder. 1. Museum etiquette. Luna is at an art museum doing some research for a project.
Wow, what an interesting take on a Civil War piece.
That's Winslow Homer's The Veteran in a New Field. It portrays a soldier's peaceful return to civilian life.
A new field. So I guess the old field was the battlefield, right?
That's right. If you look carefully, you can see the soldier's jacket and canteen in the lower right corner.
Interesting. This would be perfect for the assignment. Am I allowed to take a photo?
Of course, but I'd just like to remind you that flash photography is not allowed in the museum.
I'll make sure the flash is off. Thanks for the reminder.
大家好，第一部分我们看到标题 reminder 这个字是名词，指提醒的话或事物，或是提示，像是 I sent an email as a reminder to all the people who are supposed to come to the meeting. 我寄了一封电子邮件给所有应该会参加会议的人作为提醒。或是 Eric sent me a reminder about the concert tomorrow night. Eric 寄给我一则关于明天晚上音乐会的提醒。接着我们看到一个单字 etiquette 这个字是名词，指礼仪或是礼节。例如 When eating in foreign countries, it's a good idea to learn the correct dining etiquette. 在国外用餐时是学习正确用餐礼仪的好时机。或是 In Japan, there are special etiquettes to bowing. 在日本鞠躬时有特殊的礼节。再来我们看到名词 battlefield 指战场或是战地。我们可以说 When visiting France, we toured a battlefield from World War II. 我们在法国时参观一个二次世界大战的战场遗址。又或者说 It was very dangerous near the battlefield, for guns were being fired constantly. 战场附近是非常危险的，因为那里枪声不断。接下来我们看到一个单字 assignment 这个字是名词，意思是作业、功课或是任务。举例来说 Our English teacher Mr. Brown gives us homework assignments almost every day. 我们的英文老师 Mr. Brown 几乎每天给我们出作业。或是 Doug usually has at least 1 week between assignments at work. Doug 每份工作间隔至少有1个星期。
and welcome back to today's Plus Talk, which is on a gentle reminder. That is the title of today's Plus Talk. And in the first part, we have Luna and a museum security officer. And the title of this part is Museum Etiquette. Etiquette is a set of rules of proper behavior in a social situation. So when you are at a dinner, let's say with people that you don't know very well, a formal dinner, then you have to follow certain rules of etiquette in order not to appear like you are uneducated, like no one has ever taught you how to eat properly. So you might have to hold the fork and knife a certain way, and you have to follow certain rules to make you seem polite. Here we are talking about museum etiquette, which is the way you should behave when you are in a museum.
Exactly. And I remember when I was a kid, of course, we had a book. I think it was Amy Vanderbilt's Everyday Etiquette or something like that. So this book told you basically how to behave in all sorts of different situations. And of course, if you did not behave that well, you would be considered a cultural savage. So again, she's at the museum and she's learning about the rules there. And Luna is at an art museum doing some research for a project, and she sees a work of art there, and she says, wow, what an interesting take on a Civil War piece. Now, here we've got the word take. That just means one's interpretation or one's version of something. So, of course, this could be a work of art that has to do with the Civil War, the American Civil War, but this particular artist had his or her own kind of idea about this concept. So that's your take on something. If you want to ask for somebody's opinion, sometimes you say, well, what's your take on that? What's your opinion about that?
Right. And Luna here is talking about something related to the Civil War. It's a piece. We'll find out later that it's a painting that she's talking about. So it's a painting, a piece about the Civil War. So the Civil War refers in this context to the war that was fought between the North and the South in the United States between 1861 and 65. And the museum security officer says to Luna, that's Winslow Homer's The Veteran in a New Field. So he tells Luna that this painting is by Winslow Homer, who was an famous American painter, and The Veteran in a New Field is the title of this painting that she's looking at.
Indeed. So that's the work of art there. The title again is The Veteran in a New Field. It portrays a soldier's peaceful return to civilian life. It's kind of interesting. Luna says, a new field. So I guess the old field was the battlefield, right? So the word field here kind of has two meanings. Field could be an area of land, a battlefield, or a baseball field or something like that. But it also does refer to an area of study or in the economy. What's your field? You know, the field of architecture, for example. That would be what you've studied and the kind of job you have in architecture.
That's right. And if you look at the painting, which actually exists, The Veteran in a New Field, it shows a man in a field and he's working the field. He's basically a farmer. He looks like a farmer. He's tending to the grains to the field. And this is a veteran. A veteran is somebody who was once in the military, especially during a war. And veterans, they fought in a war or they were in the military and now they're not anymore. So they are returning to normal life. So when Luna says, a new field, I guess the old field was the battlefield. She's referring to the fact that this man, this veteran, used to fight on the battlefield when he was in the war. And when he left the battlefield, he had to go and work on the field and tend to his crops.
Right, so he's no longer a soldier. And, of course, the museum security officer says that's right. The old battlefield was the old field. But if you look carefully, you can see the soldier's jacket and canteen in the lower right corner. A canteen is a container for water, usually carried by soldiers, but people going on hikes can carry them as well. Canteen is similar to a flask, except a canteen usually is covered by cloth and it has some hooks on the side so that you can carry it with a strap.
Right. It's not really the same as a water bottle, which is what you bring to the gym or that you use after your yoga class. A canteen is usually bigger and it's round and kind of flat. And as Roger said, it's usually covered with some sort of green cloth to make it look. When you're fighting in a battlefield, you don't want your canteen to shine and catch the attention of your enemies.
Luna thinks that is interesting, and she says so. Interesting. That is interesting. And she says this painting would be perfect for the assignment. I guess she's in an art class and she needs to maybe write a paper explaining a work of art or interpreting a work of art. I remember when I took some art history classes in the university, we were required to go down to the university museum and pick out a work of art and write a paper about it to interpret the painting and stuff like that. So that, of course, is an assignment, something you need to do for a class. You can have assignments for classes, indeed, in university or in high school, but you can also have assignments at work. Maybe your boss will tell you to do some work regarding a new client or something. Do some research for them. Do some market research to see what kind of products we can sell to them. That's your assignment. That's what you need to do.
Right. And if you're a spy or a detective, your assignment might be to find out who the killer is in Moscow, and you're sent on this very dangerous assignment that nobody knows about, and you have your identity protected, and you have to complete this assignment.
Right, so of course she's going to write something about that painting, but it would be easier if she had a picture of it so she could take it back to her dorm room. And she says, "Am I allowed to take a photo?" The officer says, "Of course, but I'd just like to remind you that flash photography is not allowed in the museum." Lots of museums do allow photography. Some don't. You need to ask first. But in this particular case, the museum security officer reminds her that she needs to turn the flash function of her camera off. Most people use smartphones to take pictures these days, and I don't see flash photography as much as I used to. People don't use flash like they used to, but still, it damages works of art if you take pictures of them using the flash, so you have to turn it off.
Yep, and you definitely don't want to take a photograph of a painting in a museum with flash photography because you'll end up with that flash mark in the photo. So you just wouldn't want to do that anyway, regardless of whether there is a rule against it or not.
And she says, "I'll make sure the flash is off. Thanks for the reminder." So again, that was the gentle reminder from the museum security officer to turn off the flash on her camera. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the second part. We'll listen first.
2. A late project. Luna's art history professor has called her into his office. "Take a seat, Luna. As you know, the paper on Civil War artists was due 2 days ago. We usually have a strict policy for late submissions, but we can give students extensions in some circumstances. You've always turned in your assignments on time, so I wanted to touch base with you and get a feel for what's going on."
Yes, I meant to email and ask for an extension, but things have been a little crazy recently. I had a family emergency last week, and I had to take a few days off. I'm almost finished with the assignment, though. I should be able to turn it in tomorrow.
I understand. I'll extend the deadline to this Friday.
第二部分我们看到单字 submission， 这个字是名词，指提交或是呈递。例如 The deadline for submission of this assignment is the last day of this semester. 提交这项作业的最后期限是这个学期的最后一天。另外，我们来补充这个字的动词 submit, S-U-B-M-I-T, submit. 我们可以说 Ben submitted an application for the job opening. Ben 对该工作职缺提出了申请。又或者说 Marcus submitted his proposal yesterday and is awaiting approval. Marcus 昨天提交了他的提案，现在正在等待批准。最后我们看到一个单字 extension， 这个字是名词，意思是延期、延伸或是扩展。例如 John has applied for an extension to the visa because he wants to stay here for a longer time. John 申请了签证延期，因为他想留在这里久一点。或是 The history teacher gave an extension on the assignment's deadline. 历史老师延长了这项作业的期限。另外，我们补充这个字的动词 extend, E-X-T-E-N-D, extend, 指延期或是延长。我们可以说The clothing company wants to extend its range of products to include jewelry. 那间服饰公司想要拓展产品线，加入珠宝首饰。或是 Casper was having a wonderful time in Thailand, so he decided to extend his stay. Casper 在泰国玩得很开心，所以他决定延长停留的时间。
So in this second part of our lesson, which is titled A Late Project, Luna is going to talk to her professor. So she has already been to the museum. She's taken a photo of this painting that she wants to use for her assignment. And now she is talking to her professor. The professor says, "Take a seat, Luna. As you know, the paper on Civil War artists was due 2 days ago. We usually have a strict policy for late submissions, but we can give students extensions in some circumstances." So we find out from the professor that Luna is actually late on handing in her assignment. The assignment was due 2 days ago and she didn't hand it in. She did not complete her assignment. But the professor says that's okay, even though we usually have a strict policy for late submissions. And here, submission comes from the verb to submit, which is when you give a document to someone for them to grade, to read, or to consider. So submission is the act of giving the document to somebody. And here, there is a policy. You can't submit your assignment late. But the professor says we can give students extensions in some circumstances, meaning in certain cases, we will allow the student to submit their assignments a little bit later. We can extend the deadline.
Right, an extension is when something is extended or made longer. I think here in Taiwan, if you come here on a tourist visa and you want to stay longer, you can apply for an extension and remain longer and check out some of the wonderful things that Taiwan has to offer. But in this particular case, you probably need to talk to the professor first about that extension because they have some special circumstances in which extensions are permitted, like if you had a family emergency or something like that, or there was a blackout with the electricity or something, or there was an earthquake or a terrible flood or something like that. They can give extensions in those circumstances. And the professor goes on to say, "You've always turned in your assignments on time, so I wanted to touch base with you and get a feel for what's going on." So she's been responsible in the past, and the professor thinks it's kind of weird. Hey, you usually turn your assignments in on time, but this time you're late. What gives? What's the problem? So he wants to touch base. If you touch base with somebody, you get in contact with them again and get an update on their information.
Right, and the professor wants to touch base with or to communicate with, to see what's going on with Luna and to get a feel for what's going on. To get a feel means to understand something better. The professor wants to understand what's happening with Luna. She's usually so good about handing things in on time. Her submissions are usually on time, so why is it that she hasn't submitted her assignment yet this time? So the professor is very nice to Luna, but there's also a reason. It's because Luna has always been a very good and conscientious student.
Right, so the professor wants to understand Luna's situation. And she says, "Yes, I meant to email and ask for an extension, but things have been a little crazy recently." So she does know that her assignment is late, and at the beginning, she wanted to send the professor an email and tell her about her situation and ask for an extension. But hey, things have been rather crazy. Crazy does mean you're kind of insane. You're not in control of your mind. But if things are crazy, that means they're kind of hectic. Lots of things are happening, and it's very difficult to organize things because so much is happening.
Right, and she continues by telling the professor, "I had a family emergency last week and I had to take a few days off." So when when people say they had a family emergency, it usually means that something happened at home that needed their immediate attention. It usually refers to a sudden event that affects the health or safety of your family member. So it's something that people say when they don't want to go into it. They don't want to say exactly what happened. They don't want to say, my brother broke his leg, so I had to take him to the hospital. They just say, I had a family emergency, and that's why I was not able to do my work. Or you might tell your boss, I need to take the afternoon off because my husband just called me and there's a family emergency and I have to leave right away.
Exactly. So that's what happened to her. She had a family emergency and she had to take a couple of days off. She had to leave class for a few days. And she goes on to say, I'm almost finished with the assignment though. So even though I took a few days off for a family emergency, I almost finished the project. Even though I had this circumstance, I should be able to turn it in tomorrow. So yes, when you present a document, a paper, when you make a submission, you turn it in, you give it to the professor so they can grade it. And the professor says, I understand, I'll extend the deadline to this Friday. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。在第二部分的对话里， late submission 来表达迟交。这个单字 submission 就有提交呈递的意思，那它是来自动词 submit。 我们来学它的字首字根，看到 MIT 或是 MISS 这一类的字根呢，它具有送出或是投射的意思。在 submit 这个字当中，它的字首 sub 表示下方，那么字根 mit 表示送出。同学们可以试着想，东西从下属下位者呈送上去，呈交上去，这样应该可以联想到 submit 它有提交呈递或者是服从的意思。我们顺便补充两个有这一类字根的单字，第一个是 emit EMIT， 它的字首 E 表示向外，由内向外，那么 MIT 表示送出投射，合在一起 emit 它就有这个发出发射或是散发的意思。第二个补充的是 dismiss DISMISS， 好，那它的字首 DIS 表示离开远离，那么字根 MISS 同样有 send 或者是 let go 的意思，把人送走，叫人离开，应该可以联想到 dismiss 它有解雇解散的意思吧。好， Luna 过去总是准时交作业，但这一次报告却迟交了，教授想要跟他谈一谈，了解发生了什么事。文中用到 I wanted to touch base with you。Touch base 字面意思是触及垒包，那刚刚这句话当然不是说我想跟你触及垒包，这听起来怪怪的哦。好， touch base 这个片语常常出现在商业用语里面，表示和某人见面聊一聊，以便能了解某件事的进度。我们可以用 touch base with somebody 来表达跟某人联系，告知相关的讯息或是事情的进展。像我们可以说 Let's get together sometime next week to touch base。我们下周找个时间碰面聊一聊吧。好，那顺便补充两个跟垒包有关的用语。第一个 touch all the bases， 字面意思是触及所有的垒包，踏遍4个垒包，那引申的意思就是面面俱到，所有该考虑的重点或是主题都有包含在内了。例如 Janet made sure that she touched all the bases in her report。Janet 确保自己的报告呢有面面俱到，所有该写的东西都有写到。第二个补充的是 off base， 它原本是指棒球场上跑垒者他离开垒包，这时候很容易被触杀出局，所以是很要不得的行为。那这个用语就引申的意思是完全弄错，认知假设错误。前面常常会用 way 来修饰， way 在这边有很怎么样，非常怎么样的意思，所以 way off base 就可以表达大错特错了。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Reminder: Susan sent her colleague an email reminder about Thursday's meeting. Assignment: Sue has been working on the assignment all day. Submission. At this stage, no date has been set for the submission of applications. Extension. Please contact me as soon as possible if you need an extension.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.